Another book that I have, a dog-eared copy, mostly a Xerox copy, is from Balashov. Was Balashov
Oh,
some?
Balashov was another one of the icons at that time.
Mhm.
Masterful scientist, writer. I visited him in his lab. Um, you find this hard to believe, but I think of the time we were in the Cold War in the 1960s. Why would a young American scientist at a small university reach out to go to the Soviet Union, of all places, to work with a Soviet scientist on what? On ticks and tick-borne diseases, which was of minor importance in the United States at the time. And yet, I was fascinated with their work on the systematics and the basic biological concepts of the time of immunology and epidemiology, especially epidemiology. And had followed so much of their writings, I just wanted to see them in person. And so I got a visa. The only visa I could get was a businessman's visa. So why is a businessman going to a communist country, of all places? And not any communist country, the Soviet Union, which hates businessmen, right? Nevertheless, that's the way they set it up. So I arrived, and of course, they saw my name, and I thought that was German. And, you know, we're now talking 20 years after World War II. So I said, well, it may be German sounding, but I'm Jewish and I'm not German. Okay, we passed that one. Great relief there. So I arrived at Leningrad Airport and chauffeured to the Zoological Institute. That's where this is going to take place. And I got out of the car, out of the cab, and this is a true story. I couldn't make this up. It was a red carpet, literally a red carpet awaiting me. And the Zoological Institute staff and there's technicians, the whole group was all standing out in front, waiting for the arrival of this American visitor. And I marched down or up the the red carpet into the building. I was greeted with all kinds of flowers and thank you. And they were very, very impressed, very grateful that an American visitor would want to come visit them. Bear in mind, at the time was not widely recognized. I had a few publications other than that, but from there on in, and of course I had a car and a driver to go with me, and a translator. So the deal was you get your visa and you can get around by car, and a government car. The streets were virtually empty. The only cars that were moving were government cars. And the only people populating those cars were government appointed drivers. We didn't have anybody else in the car, but I'm sure I was being watched very carefully. And a translator. So it was me, the driver, and the translator. And went into the Zoological Institute. And day after day, I visited there in the morning, worked all day on all kinds of systematic things and exchanged information. And the scientists there all read English very, very well. They were very proficient. They had read my work, they had read other works, but we communicated through the translator. They could not speak English fluently, and certainly I had no Russian capability. The only time I tried to figure out anything in Russian when I walked across the street, I figured out what the sign said, which said, "Do not cross here," after I crossed the street. With that, I figured I'd better not try any further, depend on the translator. So when the appointment was over, after about 2.5 weeks or so, I headed back to the airport to continue my trip back home. And the Russian scientists were very gracious and gave me all kinds of specimens and alcohol to continue our systematic work and copies of their work in Russian, which I could then get translated. Put it all in my briefcase and arrived at the airport, showed my credentials, and the Russian supervisor there, the clerk, opened my briefcase and he saw these things and he was virtually crazy. And he picked up the phone and started screaming into the phone. I could hear the other side screaming back. And I thought, oh, well, I guess I'll be in Siberia. I mean, what is this guy taking out? What are all these secret information and secret materials that he's gathering and walking away with? And finally, whatever the guy on the other side said, the clerk slammed my briefcase down, pushed it all the way as hard as he could, slammed it, threw it across the desk onto the floor. And people there looked around, they all disappeared. They didn't want to be anywhere near me. And I gathered up my supplies, put it back in the briefcase, shook a little bit. Obviously, I was almost in trauma, and walked back, walked up onto the plane. And people looked around and said, "What took you so long?" No problem. I just had to gather and put things back in my briefcase. And that's how I returned after. When I go back to the United States, the clerk on the U.S. side opened my briefcase and he said, "What's all this?" I said, "Some stuff I'm bringing back from a visit overseas." He said, "Okay, see you later. Welcome back." He had no problem.
No problem. Well, so the interest there in ticks was probably derived from mostly tick-borne encephalitis virus. Is that the?
A lot of that was driving it, yeah.
Hmm.
Very serious problem. It still is, yeah.
Sure. I wonder if it was being speculated as a bioterrorism weapon at that time, if maybe that's what was on the other end of that call.
I have a hunch you're right. I had spent some time at Fort Detrick as a graduate student. We were considering bioweapons at the time, and maybe they saw that in my credentials. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you had to give them for the visa a list of everything about you. So maybe they did some research on their own. It's hard to know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my number just wasn't on the list of people they wanted to capture and trade for spies. So I guess they decided I wasn't a spy, and see you later.
Of course, these days we hear about people thinking that maybe Lyme disease was developed as a bioterrorism, or was it an escape bioterrorism weapon.
Right.
What do you think Willy Bergdorfer would think of that way that his work's been interpreted?
Well, we'll leave those conspiracy theorists to the kind of folks that delve into that sort of thing. And you and I and others like us will stay with the facts and stay with the science.
Yep, that sounds like a good way to go.